What are Golden Suisui's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So interestingly, Kuro Games has actually already put Suisui's kit in-game for us to read via the story. Whenever you get to play her during the story, you can open up her menu and then read everything that she does. So because of that, we actually already have most of the nitty-gritty details on this character. So, the first thing that I want to say is that she is going to complete Hiyuki's premium team. This is something that I am extremely excited about. If you pulled for Lucilla and you have Hiyuki, this is going to be the final piece of the puzzle in your Glacio Chafe team. Now, I will say that if you already have Chisa with a signature weapon, then you don't really need to pull for Suisui, and your Glacio Chafe team is already going to be very strong. However, Suisui appears as if she is still going to be an upgrade even if you're in such a position, because while Chisa is a really good third soul teammate for Hiyuki, Suisui applies Glacio Chafe, and not only that, she has quite the number of buffs to her name: 25% damage amp, 12% damage bonus. She's also able to increase the cap of all negative statuses except Havoc Bane by 3, and if you're a character that directly consumes negative statuses like Hiyuki or Yangyang Xuanling, then you also get 50% bonus attack. So yeah, she is shaping up to be an excellent partner for Hiyuki, and if you want the best team possible for your Miko with Flaming Sakura, well then Suisui is going to be the character for you. If you're wondering whether she is still going to be an upgrade for your Miko with Flaming Sakura even if you don't have Lucilla, consider this. Whenever Hiyuki first released, Linny and Chisa was her best team. So obviously a character that's even more tailored to Hiyuki, like Suisui, is going to be better than Chisa in that case. And if Chisa Linny was already a really strong team for her, then yes, of course, Suisui in Chisa's place in that particular team is not only going to be really good, but it's going to be an upgrade. So don't worry if you weren't able to get your hands on Lucilla yet, you can just get her on a rerun if you wish, but she is not necessary in order for Suisui to be a good upgrade to your Hiyuki. So all my fellow Hiyuki fans, we are winning. There is also the fact that she is just generally good for all of the negative status DPSs. Well, she's actually not particularly good with Zani, but we're gonna talk about that more a little bit later. However, when it comes to all of the other negative status DPSs, she looks as if she is going to be able to, at the very least, work with them, and at the very best, be best in slot with them. For Hiyuki, as we already discussed, she is going to be best in slot for her. She also appears as if she is going to be best in slot for Xuanling Yangyang. I also personally expect Suisui to be more important to Xuanling than Chisa is. However, don't get me wrong, Chisa is still a really good teammate for her. I do expect her to work fine in Fusion Bursts with Imouth. I don't necessarily think she's going to outclass Chisa there, but I think that if you felt that team was weak before because you didn't have Chisa, then Suisui is at the very least going to be able to make that team feel good to play. I think that even if Cardathea is not able to benefit from the attack buff that Suisui provides, because while she does consume her own negative status, she can't really benefit from attack as an HP scaler, she's still going to, at the very least, be able to use Suisui. I do think this is going to be one of her weaker synergies, but it will at the very least still work. But in an ideal world, you would rather just use Chisa with her instead. And if you're wondering whether it's worth using her if you have Shakona, you would rather just use Air Rover on the end or use Chisa on the end. Now, the reason why Chisa is better for Cardathea specifically is because Chisa can apply Havoc Bane, and Havoc Bane shreds defense, which can buff Cardathea, and it buffs basically any damage type. Another thing is that she applies quite a bit of Havoc Bane, and Air Rover can convert other negative statuses into erosion, which is what the entire synergy is based around. I should also say that in the Fusion Burst team, an S1 Suisui, regardless of whether the characters have their signature weapon or not, is going to be better than an S1 Chisa. So if you want Suisui to be an upgrade over Chisa in the Fusion Burst team, you can very much achieve that, but then you have to get her S1. Once again, that applies regardless of whether you have the character's signature weapon or not. Then there's the fact that she is going to be best in slot for Xuanling Yangyang. If you pulled for Xuanling, but you don't have a Chisa, then that's completely fine. You can pull for Suisui and you're going to be perfectly okay. I personally believe that Suisui is going to be more important to Xuanling's performance than Chisa is going to be. I will say that if you did pull for Chisa, you haven't lost per se, because I do still think she's going to be a part of Xuanling Yangyang's final best in slot team, so don't worry, you did not waste your pulls, and it was still a good long-term investment in the end if you invested into Havoc Bane. However, Regardless of whether you're a Chisa haver or not, she is going to be best in slot for Xuanling, and you are going to really want her. She's going to provide some really nice buffs to her, and is essentially the ideal third slot teammate for Xuanling Yangyang. So if you're interested in having that lady's absolute best in slot team, then you are definitely going to want to consider getting Suisui, which I think is very relevant when you consider that Xuanling is the newest Havoc DPS, and we haven't gotten one since freaking 2.5. I also think that's especially relevant when you consider that Chisa is a lot more disposable in these teams as opposed to Suisui, simply because she has multiple other options for second slot teammates, like Mortefi, Rebecca, Yuno, Frolova, basically anybody that's able to buff heavy attacks in some capacity, or provide some kind of Havoc percent on outro, whereas with her third slot, Suisui is simply definitively going to be the best one, no debate about that. So Suisui is shaping up to be a pretty strong character, but she definitely still has some flaws that we have to discuss. One of them being that Zani is kind of being left in the dust here. This woman, man, she is impossible to buff. Zani is still fully reliant on Phoebe for one, so that's already one issue. And second of all, she doesn't really care about most of the buffs given to negative status characters, and any of the other useful buffs that Suisui is able to provide, Zani's just not really able to take advantage of them, so she's in a position where every good thing that Suisui provides is just something that she kind of doesn't care about. And another thing that I should mention is that if you play Suisui, then you're not able to play Triple Nightfall. This is because that synergy is entirely dependent on Spectra Rover. If you don't know what Triple Nightfall is, it's essentially whenever you make her do 3 big heavy slams during her ult state. And the way that you do this is that during her rotation, you swap out the Spectra Rover, use his ult, use his skill, swap back into Zani, and there you go. You have enough left to do another big slam with her. And this increases Zani's DPS considerably, and right now, it is her baseline. If you're only able to do 2 slams of Zani per rotation, especially considering you're using a support that doesn't even benefit her all that much, you are really limiting her performance. She really wants Rover in order to perform well. So, unfortunately, if you're really big on Zani, then yeah, this just kind of is a situation where you're not getting any scraps here, which is really, really unfortunate, but you can really see this character showing her age as one of the first few premium negative status DPSs. It is absolutely cooked. Then, one other flaw about Suisui is simply that she doesn't raise the Havoc Bane cap. The reason that this is relevant is because Xuanling has an inherent skill that is dependent on how many Havoc Bane stacks you have. If you have 4 to 6 stacks of Havoc Bane, then each stack of Havoc Bane amplifies the damage that Xuanling does by 12% up to 36%. Whereas if you only have 1 to 3 stacks, then each stack of Havoc Bane amplifies the damage from Xuanling by 10% up to 30%. So you miss out on her full potential if you don't have Chisa, essentially, because she's the character in her team that is intended to raise the Havoc Bane cap. This is why I say that Chisa pullers did not completely lose out, because she very much is still going to be best in slot in Xuanling teams for this very reason. This isn't really some kind of deal breaker, it simply means that Suisui is not really able to compensate for every positive thing that Chisa brings to the table. Then the final flaw. She can definitely be replaced by Chisa in multiple different teams. And I'm sure that's surprising for me to say because I'm always so harsh on Chisa, but no, there are definitely circumstances where Chisa is just outright going to be better. Cardathea teams is one very notable example, like I mentioned before. At Fusion Burst teams, if both characters are S0R0 or S0R1, then once again you're going to want to use Chisa, unless you can get S1 on your Suisui. And while I would urge most people to get Suisui for their Hiyukis, if you have an S0R1 Chisa, you're going to be fine. You don't really have to pull for her. Even before that, you wouldn't really have to pull for Suisui anyway, because Hiyuki's simply a character that has multiple different team options, so it's not like you're forced into getting Suisui in the first place. But if you have Chisa, then you don't really require Suisui. You don't even require her for Xuanling. She's definitely more important to Xuanling than Chisa is in my opinion, just based on reading her kit. But consider Xuanling's current performance. She's a strong character, and even though she doesn't have access to Suisui at the minute, even just using Chisa still makes her good. So while Suisui is a really good character, and she's definitely going to be really strong in some given circumstances, it's worth noting that if you have already invested into Chisa, you don't really have to pull for this character. Chisa can definitely get the job done fine. Now, if you play lots of different negative status characters, or if you just want the best possible team for your Xuanling and your Hiyuki, then yes, she is definitely worth your pull, but there are going to be circumstances in which, honestly, if you have Chisa already, you can just pass on her. Because while I do think that Suisui is better for characters that are more relevant, because in my opinion, being best in slot for Hiyuki and being best in slot for Xuanling is more important than being best in slot for Cardathea, it should be noted that, first of all, Chisa is still best in slot for Xuanling anyway, that's not changing. And additionally, if you can just save pulls, sometimes that's more than enough. If you're simply able to just get away with not having to pull for a new character so you can save for other things, that is perfectly fine. So if you just want to save Astrides because you don't feel like it would be good value for your account to go for Suisui, that is honestly a smart decision. Not everyone needs Suisui. She is broken on paper, and I do think she looks like she's going to be really good, and she's definitely going to be a big boon to Hiyuki and Xuanling mains, but I would say other than those two groups, if you already have Chisa, I think you can just continue to rock your Chisa. Just pull Chisa's signature weapon the next chance you get if you don't have her sig, because a lot of Chisa's value does rely on having her signature weapon. And one other thing I would like to add, if you simply don't have Chisa, I think that does exemplify Suisui's value quite a bit, because then you don't already have that character that could technically cover it for you, though then you're getting a character that's able to cover some of the most meta units at the minute, while skipping Chisa during that awkward phase where she didn't really have much value. So if you've skipped Chisa up until this point, that was still ultimately a good decision that I would argue nets you more value in the long run. However, if someone did pull for Chisa, then they have an opportunity to skip now. It's mostly a win-win situation, but I do think that if you skipped Chisa up until this point, then Suisui is going to be a good pull at this stage. Just think twice about it if you're primarily a Cardathea main, and if you're a Zani main, I'm gonna be honest, just don't. Don't bother. Hopefully this video is able to tell you Suisui's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and you can sure as heck bet that I am excited for that Hiyuki buff.